Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Herr Christ der eine Gottessohn, which translates to Lord Jesus Christ, the only Son of God. This is a pretty straightforward chorale, not too much to say about it preceding the analysis. I think we're just going to hop right into it. There are a couple of interesting harmonic quirks, but definitely not anything that makes it stand out as far as the harmony is concerned. So 2 flats in the key signature. We start on B flat, we end on B flat, and we're in the key of B flat major. After our tonic triad, we have E flat, G, and B flat, which is E flat major. That's our 4 chord. And then we have some passing tones in the upper voices, which leaves us with E flat, A, and C, which would spell A diminished over E flat. It's like a passing 7-6-4 chord, and 4 going to 7 is a normative chord progression, especially when we're going to 1. B flat, F, B flat, and D, which is our tonic triad and root position. Following our tonic triad, we have F, A, and C. That is F major, which is our dominant. We have a passing 7th in the tenor, and then we have G, D, G, and B flat, which is G minor in root position. That is our 6th chord. This is a deceptive progression, and this is where I think we modulate to the key of G minor in anticipation for kind of an interesting cadence, a deceptive cadence in the key of G minor. So this G minor triad is also going to function like our tonic in the key of G minor, and we're going to start analyzing in the key of G minor from this point forward. We then have C, E flat, G, and A, which is A minor 7 flat 5 over C. That is 2-6-5. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. It's followed by a chord that we would expect, D, D, F sharp, and A, which is D major. That is our dominant in root position. We have another passing 7th in the tenor before we cadence not on G minor, but E flat major, E flat, B flat, G, and G, our submediant. Okay, looking ahead, we have a pretty fundamental chord progression that is a staple of Baroque music, at least if you take like a survey class of like what people might call early music. You'll learn about the falling fifths progression or the falling fifths sequence, starting things off with G minor, G, B flat, G, and D, which is our tonic triad in G minor. It also happens to be in the key of B flat major, our submediant, because this entire phrase I believe to be in the key of B flat, and it concludes with a perfect authentic cadence. This is going to start our falling fifth sequence. Following our 6th chord, we have C, B flat, G, and E flat. That's C minor 7 in root position. That is a 2-7 chord in the key of B flat. 6 going to 2 is a falling fifth. We then have F, A, F, and C, which is F major in root position. That is our 5 chord. 2-5 is a falling fifth. We have a passing 7th in the bass before we get D, B, F, and D. That's B flat major over D, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. 5 going to 1 is a falling fifth. And then we have a passing tone in the bass before we get F, B flat, F, and C. This B flat is a 4-3 suspension over the bass. This A is actually our chord tone, making this another F major triad in root position. That is our dominant, and then we cadence on B flat major, B flat, D, F, and B flat, which is our tonic triad. So 6-2-5-1, very big, very important chord progression that is a staple of the music of this particular time period. You hear it in a lot of Baroque music, as it is a topic or a harmonic topic of the sequence, the idea of sequencing. Okay, looking ahead, we have a half cadence in the key of B flat major, so no modulations at this point. We start things off with B flat major, B flat, D, F, and B flat. And as you know, I typically don't reiterate Roman numerals if we see the same chord twice or more in a row. The only time I break that rule is when we have a new system, because our eyes move and I want to create continuity. So this is a B flat major chord, and I'm going to write the Roman numeral. It's more of just a stylistic thing in my analysis, but you can choose to omit it as well if you have formatted your score differently. Like for example, if this measure was here, I wouldn't have written the 1, but because it's here, I do write the 1. We have a passing tone in the tenor, as well as a passing tone in the melody. We then have another B flat major triad, B flat, F, B flat, and D. So I'm not going to write 1 here. We have a passing 7th in the bass before we get G, G, B flat, and D. That's G minor in root position, or 6. Passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the alto before we get E flat, G, G, and E flat. That is E flat major in root position, which is our 4 chord, our subdominant in the key of B flat major. Passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the tenor before we get C, E flat, G, and E flat, which is C minor in root position, or our 2 chord. We have like a thirds progression here where every chord is a third apart, 1, 6, 4, and 2. Now the chord following this 2 chord is would make these two would make kind of an interesting progression, because on the downbeat we have A, C, F, and F. Oh, apologies, no, that's not a problem at all. We just have some passing, my notes are incorrect, apologies, strike that from the record. We have some passing tones here in the lower voices. One of them is a passing 7th, the one in the bass. Just if you're dealing with root position triads and you have a passing tone going down, it's always going to be a passing 7th, which is just something that by happenstance happens a lot in Bach's chorales. But this is a 5 chord, A, C, F, and F. I have it written as a 7-6 chord because I misread this C as an E flat when I was going through the first time. But no, this is a 5 chord in first inversion, F major over A. We then have B flat, F, and E flat. However, this E flat is a 4-3 suspension over the bass, or an accented non-chord tone, seeing as it is not being really prepared with a lot of time, but it's still sort of functioning like a 4-3 suspension. Regardless, this D is our chord tone, making this a B flat major chord, which is our tonic, and then we cadence on F major, F, A, F, and C, which is our dominant triad in root position. And with this half cadence, like most of the half cadences in the chorales, we see that there is a C in the melody, which is the 5th of the chord. And even though although the majority of the half cadences in Bach's chorales do include the 5th of the chord in the melody, not all of them do. Okay, looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G minor. So we're looking for a point on which we modulate, and I'm thinking the zone in which the modulation occurs happens around the middle of the first complete measure of this phrase, which would be the 4th phrase of the chorale, or I guess technically the 6th phrase of the chorale if you include the repeat. But this F sharp is sort of an indicator that we are moving towards G minor, knowing that G minor is going to be our destination for our cadence. But until then, we're in the key of B flat major. So we have A, C, F, and F, which is F major in first inversion. Another 5 chord, but we'll just change the figured bass, no need to reiterate the Roman numeral. And then we have B flat, F, and D, another tonic triad in root position, B flat major. Passing tone in the bass before we get D, B flat, F, and D. And this is where I chose to modulate. I think this B flat major chord right here in the key of G minor is also our 3 chord, 3-6. We could make the argument that this F chord is the point in which we modulate, and like I said, it's a zone. It's kind of ambiguous here. It's not as clear because there's counterpoint going on. Voices are doing different things, but I mean, you could analyze the entirety of this phrase in the key of G minor if you wanted to, but I think it's around this point that the melody starts to morph into G minor, and in compliance with what's going on in the bass and the rest of the supporting voices, G minor starts to form. So this is the point that I chose. I think anything in this before this F sharp could be an accurate point in which you decide the modulation occurs. But we have another passing tone in the bass before we get F, A, F, and C. That is F major in root position, which is 7, our subtonic 7th, that with this chromatic passing tone, this F sharp here, and this E, turns into F sharp, A, E, flat, and C, which is F sharp fully diminished 7th in root position. One could even make the argument that this 7 chord, this F and this F, are both accented non-chord tones, and instead this F sharp and this E flat are the tones that are the objects of the chord that's happening on the harmonic rhythm. But I think that this This is actually a subdivision of the harmonic rhythm, because if you know anything about chromaticism or chromatic bass lines in Bach's chorales, you know that the normative chord progressions or just chord progressions that you would expect in a tonal work it's hit or miss. You come across some interesting chord progressions that Bach has to kind of fudge or force a narrative that goes against the grain of what typically you would expect in a tonal progression. So you get some very interesting progressions in contexts that involve chromatic bass lines, both ascending and descending. So in this case, I feel like our subtonic seventh is turning into our leading tone seventh, because we've seen that in prior chorales. I don't have BWV numbers, but I can attest to the fact that we've seen progressions like this, not necessarily subdivided, but over, a normal harmonic rhythm on numbered beats, not ands. But this is just a subdivided chord progression. That's the argument I'm making. Regardless, it resolves where we expect. G, A, D, and B flat. So this A is a 9/8 suspension over the bass, but we know that our tonic triad is what's being implied here. And then when the G resolves, we get B flat in the bass, B flat, G, D, and B flat, which turns it into a first inversion triad, fully voiced. And as we're closing in on our cadence, we get C, G, E flat, and A, which is A minor 7 flat 5 over C, which is a 2-6-5 chord. We know that Bach loves those. And the chord kind of gets turned into root position with the A leaping down, as well as the E flat turning to C. But in a diminished triad, even though this is a seventh chord, the foundation is a triad, the fifth is what really gives it its quality. So when we get rid of the fifth, or we have a resulting chord that doesn't have a fifth, we can use logic to infer that the quality of the chord after the transformation is still probably diminished in nature, but on the page it isn't. So I don't feel like the analysis is as strong. But you could analyze it that way if you wanted, saying that the chord turns into root position, but I feel like the full chord needs to be present in order for it to be warranted to be put on the page. Okay, so following our 2-6-5 chord, we have the chord that we would expect, D, F sharp, D, and A, which is D major. That's our dominant, our 5 chord. And then we cadence on G major. Not G major, G minor, G, B flat, G, B flat, D, and G. Very interesting leap here. We have a diminished fourth, F sharp to B flat, which sounds like a major third, so it's an interesting interval to sing. When you see it on the page, you see a fourth, but it sounds like a third. Okay, looking ahead, we are moving to the key of B flat, because we conclude the chorale with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B flat, but I don't think the modulation happens immediately, because we start off with secondary dominance, and we are tonicizing a chord that is both in the key of G minor and in the key of B flat. So I feel like after the secondary dominance is where we modulate. So we have G, B natural, G, and D, which is our G major chord. So we have some false relations here, B flat and B natural, but this G major chord is functioning like a dominant of C minor, which is our 4 chord in the key of G minor, which we're still in for now. And that's where it goes, C, C, G, and E flat, which is C minor. That also happens to be our 2 chord in the key of B flat, and this is a pretty clear place in which we can expect should say that the modulation is occurring right here, because the chord progression following this 2 chord is very typical. We have 2 after some passing tones. We have A, E flat, F, and C, which is F7 over A. That is 5, 6, 5. So 2 going to 5 is a normative progression, falling fifths, and then we get root position going on the offbeats. Sorry if you could hear my dog in the background. We have F, A, F, and C, and that's like taking the 7 chord and turning it into root position. So we could just change the figure bass right here and omit the Roman numeral. 8, 5, 3 undoes the 7th and turns it into root position. My figured bass is not the absolute best. I should definitely brush up on my figure bass, but for all intents and purposes, the figure bass that I have been using in the videos up until this point, I think has been clear in conveying the point I've been trying to get across. Okay, following our 5 chord, we have B flat major, B flat, F, and D, which is our tonic triad in the key of B flat. And we get some more subdivision happening as we are closing in on the end of the chorale. We have E flat here, which is a non-chord tone. We have G here, which is a non-chord tone. And if you take the aggregate of all of the resulting tones that happen on beat 3 and, we have E flat, B flat, G, and D, which is E flat major 7. And that is a 4-7 chord. And considering 4 going to what's going to be 5 on the next beat is a normative progression, I feel like it's worth analyzing. So we have F, F, A, and C, like I just said, that is a 5 chord. 1, 4, 5 is a very typical cadential scheme. We then get a passing 7th here in the tenor before our bass leaps down an octave, so we don't need to reanalyze that, but there is kind of like a 7 chord happening here on 4 and. It doesn't really feel super important to analyze, so I'm going to leave it off, but mention it. And then we cadence on B flat major, B flat, D, F, and B flat, which is our tonic triad and root position. And that is our analysis for today. All in all, very straightforward chorale. The only point that I was gonna talk about at length that was interesting had to do with, well, actually this rising chromaticism here was very interesting, but here, I analyzed this part in my notes as a 7 chord, and I'm like, well, 2 going to 7 is something that I've said is the one configuration of predominant and dominant functioning chords that I don't think is the strongest because of the fact that the 2 and the 7 chord have so much in common pitch-wise. So the fact that it's happening in the wild over 2 beats is fascinating to me. But rest assured, my theory is still intact because it is not a 7 chord. It is a 5-6 chord, so very good that my hypothesis, my theory of 2 going to 7 not really being a real progression in Bach's terms, or Bach's harmonic vocabulary is still standing strong, because I have really stood by that particular analysis and have not necessarily tried to force that narrative, but have questioned whenever it comes up in the chorales as to whether, like why it's happening. It feels like there needs to be some sort of legitimacy to it. Like 2 going to 1 for the same reason. 2 going to 7 going to 1 is just an extension of that same thought process of the fact that the chord progression isn't very strong. It's like the weakest of the predominant, dominant, tonic chord progressions. 4 going to 7 is very strong, 2 going to 5 is very strong, and 4 going to 5 is very strong. But 2 going to 7, the chords are a third apart, so they share more notes in common than they don't, and it's just not. It's just the objectively the weakest configuration of predominant and tonic dominant chords. So it is how it is, and there's a reason why they don't occur very commonly in conjunction with one another. But that being said, I'm going to cap the video off on that thought. If you're interested, oh, sorry, I just hit my knee on my desk. If you are interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, I would be happy to have you. Think about hitting the subscribe button and hitting the notification icon if you want some daily dose of Bach or your daily fix of analysis, or both. You're definitely in the right place, and there are hundreds of videos in store for the future, and you'll be notified of when my daily video goes live, so that's a plus as well. But on that note, thank you so much for watching the video. If you've gotten this far, thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.